The ash ravens had eaten queens, liars, and women whose bloodline made the dragon court uncomfortable. So when they sent Nerissa Vale into the feeding yard with a silver bowl of funeral meat in her hands, no one expected her to come back with skin. They expected bones. Clean ones. Picked white before the second bell. That was how the court disposed of cursed girls without calling it execution. Nerissa stood at the edge of the ash yard while gray snow fell from a sky that had not been blue in 13 years. Behind her, the dragon court gathered beneath the covered stone gallery, wrapped in black fur, gold chains, and ceremonial pity. Before her stretched a circular pit of dark sand and burned feathers. Perches made from old dragon ribs rose from the ground like the cage of some dead giant. Hundreds of black ash ravens watched from those ribs, their eyes red as coals, their beaks hooked and bright with old blood. No royal woman fed them. Not anymore. The court said ash ravens devoured any blood that lied about succession. They tore false heirs apart. They screamed at forged names. They stripped pretenders until only truthful bone remained. That was the story. Nerissa had cleaned enough death bowls to know stories were often written by people who survived the birds. She wore a plain, soot-gray servant dress, too thin for the cold, with rope burns around both wrists and a black feather mark burned beneath her left collarbone. The mark had appeared when she was 12, after she carried water to a dying raven no one else dared approach. Since then, the court called her raven-cursed. Servants refused to sleep near her. Children spat behind her path. Priests made warding signs when her shadow crossed royal thresholds. A cursed girl could still be useful. She could scrub ash from floors. She could carry dead birds to the furnace. She could be blamed when ravens screamed at night. But she could not be trusted near crowns. That was what Lady Marith said. Lady Marith stood at the front of the gallery, in a gown of black silk and pearl-gray feathers, her pale hair coiled beneath a mourning veil. She was not queen, not priestess, not blood heir, yet every noble made room for her as if power had its own scent. She had raised Princess Elianor, the Dragon King's elder sister, after the old king died and the lost crown vanished. She had become the court's gentle voice, its grieving memory, its careful hand over royal scandal. Nothing in her face looked cruel. That made Nerissa distrust her more. "Feed them," Marith said softly. The order carried across the ash yard. Nerissa's fingers tightened around the silver bowl. The funeral meat inside was not animal flesh. Everyone knew that too, though no one said it. The ravens fed on condemned blood, traitor flesh, and the scraps of people whose names had been cut from court record. Today, the meat had been shaped into neat red pieces and covered with ash salt to make the ritual look clean. Dragon King Luceryn Vare watched from the highest gallery step. He wore no crown. That was the first thing Nerissa had noticed. The Dragon King's lost crown had disappeared 13 years ago, on the night his father's body was found beneath the eastern balcony, and Princess Elianor was declared too broken by grief to rule. Luceryn had been crowned with a war circlet instead, black iron and dragonbone, a soldier's band for a king who had never fully looked comfortable under it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and severe, with dark hair tied at the nape of his neck and amber eyes that seemed to hold fire behind glass. Black scale armor covered his chest. A dark cloak moved behind him in the ash wind. He had the face of a man who had learned young that softness gave courtiers somewhere to aim. His gaze rested on Nerissa, not kindly, not hatefully, carefully. That was worse. Careful men noticed what others meant to bury. Marith turned toward him. "Your Majesty, the ravens cried all night after she entered the old crown aviary." Nerissa's throat tightened. She had entered because she heard a sound behind the sealed door. Not a cry, not a bird. A woman whispering from somewhere inside the ash. "Help me remember my face." She had not told anyone. That would have made her sound mad before the court had to prove it. Luceryn's eyes sharpened. Did she steal anything? Marith's expression remained sorrowful. A cursed girl does not need to steal to wake corruption. Sometimes her blood is enough. Nerissa looked at her. Then why send my blood to birds that hate lies? The gallery went quiet. Several nobles stared at her as if a bowl had spoken. Marith's gaze cooled for a breath before warmth returned. "Because, if you are innocent, the ravens will know. And if they know more than you want?" A ripple passed through the court. Luceryn descended one step. Marith smiled, but the feathers at her throat trembled. Then let them speak with their beaks. A guard shoved Nerissa forward. She stumbled into the ash yard. The ravens did not move. Their red eyes followed her, each one bright as a coal under burial dust. The farther she walked, the quieter the court became. Even the ash wind seemed to hold its breath. Nerissa reached the center of the pit. A rib perch stood before her, taller than a man, carved with old feeding marks. She was supposed to pour the meat into the hollow at its base, then kneel and press her forehead to the ash while the ravens descended. That was the ritual. That was the part no one survived when the birds found lies in the blood. Her hands shook once. She hated that the court saw it. Then she looked up at Luceryn. He was watching her hands, not the bowl. As if he had noticed the rope burns. As if he wondered who had tied her before the trial and why. Nerissa hated the hope that gave her. Hope was a cruel thing when carried into a pit. She poured the funeral meat into the hollow. The smell rose at once. Salt, iron, old smoke. The ravens stirred. One by one, black wings opened along the dragon rib perches. Ash fell from their feathers like snow from burned trees. Their beaks clicked. Their claws scraped bone. Nerissa lowered to one knee. The first raven dropped. It landed before her, massive and black, its eyes glowing red, its head tilted toward the meat, then toward her. The court leaned forward. The raven did not eat. It stepped over the meat and lowered its head. Nerissa stopped breathing. Another raven dropped, then another, then dozens. They surrounded her in a dark circle, not attacking, not screaming, not tearing at her dress or skin. Their wings folded, their heads lowered, until their beaks touched the ash. The ash ravens bowed. The court erupted. Meereth went still. Luceryn descended another step, his face no longer unreadable. The largest raven climbed onto the rib perch before Nerissa. Its feathers were darker than the others, edged with gray fire. A strip of old gold was caught around one claw, so worn with ash that no one had noticed it from the gallery. The raven opened its beak. A sound came out. Not a caw. A woman's voice, broken by smoke. Not her blood. Marith's face changed. Only for a heartbeat. But Nerissa saw it. Luceryn did too. The raven spread its wings. Every raven in the yard rose at once. The sky turned black. The court cried out as the birds circled Nerissa, not devouring her, but shielding her from every eye. Ash swirled so thick the gallery vanished. Nerissa heard wings beating overhead, hundreds of them, then fewer, then none. When the ash cleared, the ravens were gone. The feeding yard stood empty, except for Nerissa kneeling at its center and the untouched meat blackening in the bowl. For one breath, no one moved. Then the sky split with raven cries. The flock returned from the eastern ash clouds, carrying something between them. Gold, blood, dragonbone. The ravens descended in a storm and dropped the object at Nerissa's knees. It struck the ash with a sound heavy enough to silence the court. A crown rolled once, leaving a red streak in the gray dust. Not the war circlet, not the court crown, the lost crown, the true dragon crown missing since the night King Therion died. Luceryn stared at it as if the dead had placed a hand around his throat. Nerissa looked down. The crown was bent, blackened, and wet with blood that had not dried in 13 years. Lady Marith's hand rose to her throat, not to her heart, not to her mouth, to the thin line beneath her mourning veil, where a hidden clasp rested against her skin. The moment lasted less than a breath, but Luceryn saw it, Nerissa saw it, and the largest raven saw it too. It landed on the crown and drove its beak into the gold. A hidden panel sprang open. Inside lay a strip of skin-thin mirror glass. Upon it, written in dark red, were 4 words. Elianor wore another face. Elianor wore another face. The words seemed too small to hold the terror they released. They lay on the strip of skin-thin mirror glass in dark red letters, trembling inside the opened crown panel, as if the blood itself had been waiting 13 years to speak. Around the feeding yard, the ash ravens remained silent. That frightened the court more than their screaming would have. Hundreds of black birds perched along dragon ribs, gallery rails, broken statues, and the edge of the ash-dark roof, watching the nobles with ember-red eyes. Nerissa knelt before the lost crown, the silver bowl of untouched funeral meat beside her, her hands still shaking in the ash. Elianor wore another face. Dragon King Luceryn descended the final gallery step. No one tried to stop him. Even Lady Marith stood frozen, one hand still near the hidden clasp beneath her mourning veil. The movement had been tiny, but now that Nerissa had seen it, she could not unsee it. Marith had not reached for her throat in fear. She had reached for something concealed, something tied to the crown, something she knew might open. Luceryn entered the ash yard. The ravens shifted as one. Their wings half opened, not in warning, but in recognition. Ash dust rose around the king's boots as he crossed the pit toward Nerissa. He did not look at her first. His gaze remained fixed on the crown, on the red writing, on the lost object that had once sat above a succession no one in the court dared question aloud. His face had gone still, too still. Nerissa had seen that kind of stillness in wounded animals, right before pain decided whether to become fear or violence. Luceryn stopped beside the crown. Read it aloud. The command was quiet. No one obeyed. The court had spent 13 years pretending the lost crown was a tragedy, not evidence. Saying the words aloud would make them too real to fold back into silence. The largest ash raven climbed onto the bent gold rim and stabbed its beak once against the mirror glass. Crack. A woman's voice came out again, broken by smoke. Read. Luceryn looked at Lady Marith. She had recovered enough to lower her hand from her throat, but the color had left her face. Your Majesty, she said softly, the ravens are carrion things. They repeat scraps. They do not understand royal blood. Nerissa heard the lie under the gentleness. So did the birds. Every raven in the yard opened its beak, but no sound emerged. Their silence pressed against Marith until the pearls at her throat trembled. Luceryn said, Read it. This time, his voice carried the edge of fire. Marith bowed her head. Elianor wore another face. The words did not sound the same in her mouth. They sounded like something she had practiced, not saying. The mirror glass flared. A thin red line spread from the writing across the inside of the crown, leading to a second hidden seam. Nerissa leaned closer before she could stop herself. Luceryn's hand shot out and caught her wrist. The touch was firm, hot, and sudden enough to make her breath catch. Do not touch it, he said. She looked up at him. His amber eyes were not unkind, but they were hard with warning. The crown has royal blood on it. Nerissa almost laughed. It would have been a terrible sound. Your Majesty, they sent me to birds that eat lying blood. I think the crown is safer than the court. For one breath, his grip tightened. Not in anger, in surprise. Then he released her. Something flickered in his face, something reluctant and dangerous. Interest, maybe? Respect, maybe? Or the first fracture in what the court had taught him she was. Marith stepped forward. The girl should be removed. The ravens have already been disturbed by her curse. The largest raven snapped its beak toward Marith. She stopped. Nerissa noticed again the hidden clasp at her throat, barely visible beneath the veil. It was not pearl, not silver. Mirror glass. A sliver of the same pale, reflective material hidden inside the crown. Luceryn followed Nerissa's gaze. Marith saw him see. Her expression softened instantly. Luceryn, grief makes patterns of dust. Do not let accursed servant and carrion birds turn your father's death into spectacle. His jaw tightened at the use of his name. Not title. Name. The court pretended not to notice how intimate the manipulation was. Nerissa noticed. So did the ravens. The old king's death had always been told as a fall. King Tharion had been found beneath the eastern balcony, his crown missing, his elder daughter, Elianor, shattered by grief, and his younger son, Luceryn, forced into a war circlet before the court could collapse. Elianor had lived, technically, but the princess, who appeared after that night, had stopped attending council, stopped speaking in court, and remained behind veils, while Marith answered for her. Nerissa had only seen Princess Elianor once. A pale woman on a balcony, face half hidden, hand lifted as if asking for help before Marith guided her back into shadow. The memory returned now, with the whisper she had heard behind the old crown aviary door. Help me remember my face. Nerissa looked at the mirror glass inside the crown, then at Marith's throat. My king, she said. Luceryn's eyes shifted to her. The court stiffened at her audacity. Nerissa swallowed the fear rising in her chest. Ask Lady Marith to remove her veil. Marith's face became perfectly blank. Luceryn did not move. Why? Because when the crown opened, she reached for something under it. Marith gave a soft laugh. A girl who was sent to be eaten now gives commands? No, Nerissa said. A girl who was not eaten is asking why you are afraid. The ash ravens exploded into sound. Not screams. Laughter. Harsh, broken, smoke-dark laughter that rolled across the feeding yard and made several nobles cross themselves in terror. Luceryn stared at Nerissa. This time, there was no hiding the heat in his attention. You are either very brave, he said, or very tired of surviving quietly. Nerissa looked down at her rope-burned wrists. Both. The answer left her before she could make it safer. Luceryn turned toward Marith. Remove the veil. Marith's eyes hardened. No. The court stopped breathing. Luceryn stepped closer. No? My king, she said, voice lower now, stripped of its public sweetness. There are wounds that should remain covered for the health of the realm. Remove it. Marith's fingers curled near the hidden clasp. The largest raven lifted from the crown and flew straight at her. Guards shouted. Marith flinched back, and in that single movement, the mourning veil tore against the raven's claw. The thin mirror glass clasp snapped open. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the skin along Marith's throat rippled. Nerissa staggered to her feet. The court screamed. Beneath Lady Marith's jaw, where flesh should have met shadow, a second face moved under the skin like a reflection trapped beneath ice. A woman's mouth opened silently. A woman's eye appeared and vanished. The veil slipped further, and the mirror clasp struck the ground with a tiny ringing sound. The lost crown answered. The second hidden seam burst open. Inside the crown, beneath the strip of mirror glass, lay a braid of dark hair wrapped around a shard of dragon bone. Luceryn vent pale. He knew that hair. Nerissa saw it in his face before he spoke. Elianor, he whispered. The crown bled fresh red. The ravens began to chant with women's voices, all broken, all smoke-thin. Face stolen, crown hidden, sister buried breathing. Marith's beauty twisted. Only for a moment. Then the expression returned, controlled, cold, no longer gentle at all. Enough, she said. The ash beneath Nerissa's feet split open. Black hands made of burned feathers rose from the pit and seized her ankles. Luceryn reached for her, but the ravens screamed, and the lost crown rolled between them, blocking his path with a ring of blood-red fire. Marith lifted her torn veil, and the face beneath her skin smiled. Not Marith's, not Elianor's. Something wearing both badly. Raven-cursed girls should know, she said, voice doubled and wrong. Some truths are only returned so they can be killed properly. The feather hands dragged Nerissa to her knees. The black mark beneath her collarbone burned like a living coal. All the ash ravens turned toward her at once, and from the lost crown, the woman's voice whispered again. Daughter of the Raven Vow, call us. Daughter of the Raven Vow, call us. The whisper came from the lost crown, but it did not stay there. It entered Nerissa's bones. The black feather mark beneath her collarbone burned so fiercely she thought the skin had split open. Ash hands tightened around her ankles, dragging her lower into the feeding pit while the court watched from the gallery in horrified silence. For years, they had called her Raven-cursed, as if the word explained everything wrong with her. Now the curse was answering in a voice older than their accusations. Nerissa clawed at the ash, but the burned hands held fast. Luceryn stood beyond the ring of blood-red fire circling the lost crown, his face carved with rage and shock. Dragonfire gathered beneath his skin, gold flickering along his throat and hands. But the crown's flame rose higher each time he tried to step through. Marith smiled behind her torn veil. The second face beneath her skin moved with the smile, late and wrong, like a reflection that had forgotten which body it belonged to. Do not burn yourself for a servant, Luceryn, she said. The ravens have had their spectacle. Let the pit finish. Luceryn's eyes did not leave Nerissa. Release her. Marith tilted her head. You still think I command the ash? The feather hands pulled Nerissa another inch down. Ash filled her mouth. She coughed, choking on old smoke, while the mark beneath her collarbone pulsed in time with the raven's red eyes. "Call us," the crown had said. But how did a cursed girl call birds that had already returned? How did she command creatures everyone said only answered death? The largest raven stood on the crown, watching her. Not rescuing, waiting. Nerissa understood with a cold twist of terror. The ravens had bowed. They had returned the crown. They had opened the first truth. But they would not spend their power for a girl who had not yet claimed what she was. The court had named her curse. The crown had named her daughter. She had to choose which one became true. Marith lifted one pale hand. The ash hands climbed to Nerissa's knees. "Her blood has stirred old carrion magic," Marith said to the court, voice smooth again, already rebuilding the story. "You saw the birds obey her. You saw the crown bleed for her. The raven-cursed girl has tricked the relic into accusing Princess Elianor's guardian. If she lives, every succession law becomes prey to scavenger witchcraft." Nobles murmured in fear. There it was. The turn. The truth had barely drawn breath, and already Marith was dressing it as danger. Luceryn's voice cut through the gallery. "The crown named my sister. The crown named a face," Marith said. "Faces can be forged. Blood can be staged. Ravens eat corpses and repeat what dead things whisper." Nerissa lifted her head through the ash. "Then why are you afraid of what they brought back?" The question tore at her throat, but it reached the court. The largest raven clicked its beak once. Marith's eyes sharpened. The ash hands surged higher, climbing Nerissa's waist. Luceryn struck the blood-red fire with dragon flame. Gold met crimson. The yard shook. The crown rolled once, but the ring held, and pain flashed across Luceryn's face as if the flame had cut him back. Nerissa saw the danger then. The crown was not blocking him to protect Marith. It was stopping him from acting too soon. If Luceryn broke the ring by force, Marith could claim the lost crown had attacked its own king under raven-cursed influence. She would turn his protection into proof against Nerissa. Nerissa looked at him through the smoke. "Do not." His gaze snapped to hers. She had no right to command a dragon king. She did it anyway. Do not give her the ending she prepared. His jaw tightened. For a breath, he looked furious with her. Then he stepped back from the fire. Only one step. Enough. Marith's smile faltered. Nerissa forced her attention to the ravens. Hundreds of ember-red eyes stared back. She remembered being 12, carrying water to a dying raven hidden behind the furnace wall. Its wing had been broken. Its beak had snapped at every servant who came near. Nerissa had not known why she risked her hand for it. She had only known what it felt like to be left alone, because everyone believed touching you would spread misfortune. She had held the bowl anyway. The raven had drunk. That night, the black feather mark had burned into her skin. Not punishment, recognition. The ash reached her ribs. Nerissa stopped fighting the hands. The court leaned forward. Marith whispered, "There." But Nerissa was not surrendering. She pressed one ash-covered hand to the mark beneath her collarbone and spoke not to the court, not to the king, not even to the crown. To the ravens. "I fed the dying one when your own yard left it to rot," she said, voice shaking. "I carried your dead when they called me cursed. I washed blood from bowls no noble would touch. If I am raven vow, then hear me now." The ravens opened their wings. Nerissa's mark burned black-red. "I do not call you to kill for me," she whispered. "I call you to bring back what was buried beneath ash." The feeding yard went silent. Then the ash beneath her stopped moving. The hands loosened. One by one, every raven lifted from its perch. Their wings beat without sound, stirring the gray snow into a dark spiral above the pit. The largest raven dipped its beak into the blood on the lost crown and marked the ash before Nerissa with a red line. The line became a path, not out of the pit, down. The ash opened beneath her knees. Nerissa gasped as the feeding yard split into a narrow stairway made of burned feathers and black bone. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the smell of old crowns, sealed rooms, and something worse. Living breath. Marith went white. Luceryn saw it. "Elianor," he said. The name struck the yard like a bell. From below the ash, a woman answered. Not clearly, not loudly. A single, broken sob. Luceryn moved toward the opening. The crown's fire flared again, stopping him. Nerissa understood this time. The ravens had not opened the way for the king. They had opened it for her. Marith raised both hands. Close it. The feather hands turned on her. Black ash curled around her wrists. For the first time, true panic entered her face. Not because she feared being hurt, because the ritual she had trusted no longer recognized her as its master. Nerissa stood slowly, ash falling from her dress, the black feather mark glowing like a coal beneath her skin. The ravens circled above her. The court stared as the cursed girl they had sent to be eaten stepped onto the first stair beneath the feeding yard. Luceryn's voice followed her, low and dangerous. Nerissa. She looked back. His expression held command, fear, and something harder to name. Not softness. Not yet. But the beginning of a king realizing the woman he had almost watched die might be the only way to reach the sister his court had buried breathing. I am going with you, he said. The crown will not let you. His eyes burned. Then tell the crown I am not asking it. The largest raven landed between them and turned its head toward Nerissa. Waiting again. Choice. Always choice. Nerissa looked at the blood-stained crown, then at Luceryn. He may follow, she said. The crown's fire lowered. Not gone. Lowered. Luceryn stepped over it, and this time the flame did not cut him. When he reached Nerissa, he did not touch her. He stood beside her at the opening, close enough that his heat pushed back the cold rising from below. Together, they descended. Behind them, Marith screamed, If you go down there, you will not find your sister. You will find what was made from her. Luceryn stopped. Nerissa felt him go still beside her. Below the ash, the woman sobbed again. Then another voice spoke from the dark. It was Elianor's voice, and Marith's, and something wearing both. Brother, it whispered. Do not look at my face. Brother, do not look at my face. The voice rose from beneath the ash like breath through a grave. Luceryn stopped on the stair of burned feathers and black bone. For one heartbeat, he was not the Dragon King in black scale armor, not the ruler crowned with a war circlet after his father's death, not the man the court feared too much to pity. He was a younger brother, hearing a dead sister beg from beneath the floor. Nerissa felt him go still beside her. Above them, Lady Marith laughed from the feeding yard, but the sound shook at the edges. You hear it now, Luceryn? That is what the ravens brought back. Not your sister, an echo, a ruined thing wearing a voice you loved. The ravens screamed. The stairway trembled. Nerissa looked up once and saw Marith still bound by feather-dark ash, her torn mourning veil hanging from one side of her face. Beneath the exposed skin at her throat, the second face shifted again, an eye pressing under flesh, a mouth opening where no mouth should be. It did not match Marith's expression anymore. When Marith smiled, the buried face looked afraid. Luceryn's hand moved toward his sword. Nerissa caught his wrist before he drew it. He looked down at her hand. So did she. Her fingers were ash-stained and cold against the heat of him. She had never touched a king before. She had been dragged by guards, shoved by servants, tied by rope, but never had power paused because her hand asked it to. Not yet, she said. His amber eyes burned. She is below us. Yes, and Marith wants you angry enough to break the wrong thing. The words landed. Luceryn hated them. She saw that in the hard line of his mouth, but he let go of the sword. Together, they descended. The passage below the feeding yard was narrow and lined with ash-packed walls. Black feathers had been pressed into the stone like dead leaves. Some still trembled, though there was no wind. The largest raven flew ahead of them, ember eyes lighting the way with a red glow. At the end waited a door made from a single dragon rib. No lock, no handle, only a hollow at its center shaped like a crown. Luceryn stared at it. The lost crown opens this. Nerissa looked back up the stairs. The true dragon crown still lay in the ash yard, ringed by blood-red fire, the hidden panel open, the mirror glass inside it bearing the words that had shattered the court. Elianor wore another face. If we bring the crown down, Nerissa said, we may bring Marith's trap with it. The raven clicked its beak once. Luceryn's gaze sharpened. Then how does it open? The black feather mark beneath Nerissa's collarbone burned. Not with pain this time. With memory. She saw for one breath an ash field long before her birth. A woman kneeling among ravens, feeding them from her own cut palm, while a dragon crown burned behind her. The ravens did not belong to kings. They did not retrieve truth for thrones. They answered a vow older than court law. Bring back what was buried, but never let a crown own the witness. Nerissa pressed her palm to the crown-shaped hollow. I do not open this for the throne, she whispered. I open it for the woman buried beneath it. The dragon-rib door cracked. Cold air spilled out. Inside was not a dungeon. It was an old crown aviary. Broken perches hung from the ceiling. Ash covered the floor in gray drifts. Mirror shards lined the walls, most too clouded to reflect anything clearly. At the center stood a woman bound to a frame of black bone. Her wrists tied high, her body thin beneath a white gown, turned gray with years of dust. A veil of mirror glass covered her face. Luceryn took one step forward. Elianor. The woman trembled. Do not come closer, she whispered. His face broke for half a second before command buried the wound. You are alive. Only enough to be useful. The mirror veil flickered. For one instant, Nerissa saw Princess Elianor's true face beneath it. Dark hair, hollow cheeks, amber eyes like Luceryn's, exhausted and terrified. Then the mirror shifted, and Marith's face appeared over hers, smooth and beautiful, smiling with Elianor's mouth. Luceryn vent pale. The ravens filled the aviary, settling on the broken perches without a sound. The largest raven landed beside Elianor and touched its beak to the mirror veil. The glass bled. Elianor screamed. Luceryn lunged, but Nerissa seized his arm with both hands. Wait. She is hurting. Yes, Nerissa said, heart hammering. But if you tear it off by force, Marith gets to say the ravens killed her. Or you did. The mirror shards on the wall began to glow. A vision formed across them. 13 years ago, beneath an ash storm, Princess Elianor stood before King Tharion wearing the true dragon crown. The crown had answered her. Not Luceryn, not the council. Her. King Tharion said, Then you are heir. Behind Elianor stood Lady Marith, younger and softer, one hand resting on the princess's shoulder. The hand tightened. A flash of mirror glass. Elianor screamed. The crown fell. Marith pressed a shard against Elianor's face, and for one terrible heartbeat, Marith wore the princess's features perfectly. Then King Tharion turned, saw the theft, and reached for his daughter. Marith pushed him from the balcony. The crown fell with his blood. Before she could seize it, ash ravens descended, tore the crown from the stones, and vanished into the ash sky. The vision shattered. Luceryn stood motionless. Elianor bowed her head behind the bleeding veil. She could not keep my face fully without me alive, so she buried me here. Wore enough of me to guide the court, wept for me in public while using my face in private. Nerissa's stomach twisted. Above them, Marith's voice called down, no longer gentle. Tell him the rest, sweet princess. Elianor closed her eyes. The ravens stirred. Luceryn looked at his sister. What rest? The mirror veil pulsed. Elianor's voice broke. I lied after the crown chose me. Luceryn stared at her. To save you, she whispered. I told father the crown had answered both our bloodlines, not only mine. I thought if the council believed you still had a claim, they would not kill you to clear my path. The ravens opened their wings. Nerissa understood then why the ash ravens had not simply freed Elianor. They devoured blood that lied about succession. And Elianor had lied. Not for power, for love. Luceryn's face twisted with grief. You lied to protect me. And that lie gave Marith room to steal everything. The mirror veil tightened around Elianor's face. She gasped, knees buckling against the black bone frame. The ravens turned toward Nerissa, waiting. The mark beneath her collarbone burned black-red. Nerissa looked at Elianor, then at Luceryn. The ravens do not need her perfect, she said. They need the truth spoken clean. Luceryn's voice was raw. Then we make her speak it. Nerissa shook her head. No, she said. We let her choose it. Behind the mirror veil, Elianor opened her eyes. For the first time, she looked not at Luceryn, but at Nerissa, and the ash ravens bowed their heads. Elianor looked at Nerissa as if the cursed girl had offered her something no crown ever had. Not rescue. Permission. The ravens bowed their heads along the broken perches, 100 black beaks lowered toward ash. Luceryn stood beside Nerissa with dragonfire flickering under his skin, every part of him strained toward the sister bound in mirror glass. He wanted to tear the veil away. Nerissa could feel it in the heat moving off him, in the way his hands curled and opened at his sides. But he did not move. For once, the Dragon King waited. Elianor drew a shaking breath behind the bleeding veil. I was crowned first. The mirrors shuddered. Above them, Marith screamed from the feeding yard. "Do not listen to her." Elianor flinched. Nerissa stepped closer. "Say it again." The princess's lips trembled behind the glass. "The true crown answered me first." The largest raven opened its wings. The mirror shards around the aviary flared, showing the old balcony again, young Elianor standing beneath the ash storm, the true dragon crown burning gold on her brow while King Tharion stared in wonder. Luceryn appeared in the vision too, younger, standing half-hidden behind his father, not crowned, not rejected, simply a boy who did not yet know the court was about to turn love into law. Elianor's voice broke. "I told father the crown had answered both of us because I knew the council would never accept a daughter alone. I thought if Luceryn remained beside me in the claim, he would live." Luceryn's face tightened as if every word cut deeper than accusation. "You were trying to protect me. I was trying to keep them from choosing one of us to kill." The ravens hissed softly. Not at her. At the court above, Nerissa understood. The lie had not made Elianor false. It had made her vulnerable. A succession lie spoken from love had given Marith a door wide enough to drag a kingdom through. Elianor lifted her bound wrists weakly. "Marith told me I had doomed us both. She said the court would burn Luceryn as a rival unless I let her help me. I trusted her." The mirror veil pulsed. Marith's face rippled over Elianor's again, beautiful and wrong, smiling with borrowed lips. Luceryn's voice became quiet. "What did she take?" Elianor closed her eyes. "My public face. My place in the court's memory. Enough of my likeness to stand behind a veil, weep at ceremonies, and make the kingdom believe Princess Elianor had become too broken to rule. But she could not take everything. The crown would not let her, so she kept me alive beneath ash." The black bone frame tightened. Elianor gasped. Nerissa moved without thinking, pressing her hand against the frame near the princess's wrist. The black feather mark beneath Nerissa's collarbone burned, and the ravens snapped their heads toward her. A memory opened through her palm. Marith, 13 years earlier, kneeling before the same frame with blood on her hands and mirror glass at her throat. The stolen face flickered over her features as she whispered, "I do not need to be queen. I only need the court to fear what happens if the truth returns." Nerissa pulled back, breathing hard. Luceryn looked at her. "What did you see?" "She did not steal the face to rule openly," Nerissa said. "She stole it to control grief. As long as everyone believed Elianor lived broken and hidden, no one searched for the real heir." Elianor nodded once. Above, Marith's voice sharpened. "And what do you think happens if she is freed? The court will see a princess who lied about succession, a king crowned by necessity, and a raven-cursed girl commanding carrion birds. They will tear each other apart before dawn." Nerissa looked toward the stairway. Marith was not pleading. She was calculating. The court feared chaos more than murder. That had been her shield all along. Luceryn stepped toward the passage. "Then I will make them fear me more." Nerissa caught his sleeve this time. His eyes flashed to hers. She did not lower her hand. That is still her story. A king using fear to bury what fear created. His jaw clenched. "What would you have me do while my sister bleeds behind glass?" "Let the ravens judge the lie cleanly." Elianor's breath hitched. "No." Nerissa turned to her. The princess's eyes were wet behind the veil. "They eat lying blood." "They eat the lie," Nerissa said softly. "Not the reason you told it. I do not know if there is a difference to birds." The largest raven landed between them, its ember eyes fixed on Elianor. Then it lowered its head, not to Nerissa, not to Luceryn, but to the bound princess. A choice. Elianor stared at it for a long moment. Then she straightened as much as the black bone frame allowed. "I lied about the crown," she said. "I said it answered both dragon heirs." The ravens opened their beaks. "I did it to save my brother." The ash in the chamber rose. "I did not give Marith my face." The mirror veil cracked. "I did not surrender my crown." Another crack split across the glass. And I did not die. The aviary exploded with raven cries. Black wings surged forward, not tearing into Elianor's flesh, but into the mirror veil. Beaks struck glass, claws hooked false reflections. The ravens devoured the stolen lie piece by piece while Elianor screamed not in death, but in release. Luceryn reached for her, then stopped himself, shaking with the effort. Nerissa stood beside him, her own mark burning as the raven vow opened fully beneath her skin. When the last mirror shard fell, Elianor's true face appeared, pale, hollow, alive. The ravens carried the broken shards upward through the stairway, toward the feeding yard where Marith waited. Luceryn stepped forward and caught his sister as the black bone frame released her. Elianor collapsed against him, and the Dragon King held her like something returned from the dead, but not yet safe from the living. Then Marith screamed above them, not in anger, in pain. Nerissa looked up as the ravens flew toward the court with the mirror shards in their claws. The stolen face was going back to its thief. Marith's scream tore through the ash yard before Nerissa reached the top of the stairs. It was not the polished cry of a noblewoman injured in public. It was raw, animal, stripped of silk and ceremony. By the time Nerissa, Luceryn, and Elianor emerged from beneath the feeding pit, every courtier in the gallery had backed away from Lady Marith as if a plague had opened inside her skin. The ravens circled above her. In their claws glittered the shattered mirror veil. Piece by piece, they dropped the glass around Marith in a ring. Each shard struck the ash and stood upright, reflecting not her body, but every face she had worn to survive the lie. Elianor grieving behind a veil. Marith smiling in counsel. A princess's hand signing decrees with a guardian's voice behind it. A sister hidden in ash, while another woman borrowed enough of her face to keep the court obedient. Marith clutched her throat where the hidden clasp had snapped. The second face beneath her skin pressed outward. This time, it did not look like Elianor. It looked like something that had stolen too many reflections and forgotten which one was real. Elianor shuddered beside Luceryn. She could barely stand, her body thin and shaking after years beneath the ash. But she lifted her head when the court saw her. A noble lord whispered, "Princess?" The word moved through the gallery like fire touching dry cloth. Marith snapped toward him. "Do not be fools. That thing is a raven-made imitation." The raven screamed. Nerissa stepped forward before Luceryn could. Her knees still ached from the ash hands. Her throat burned from smoke. The black feather mark beneath her collarbone glowed hard enough to hurt, but she kept her voice steady. "If she is an imitation," Nerissa said, "let the ash ravens eat the lie." Marith's eyes locked on her. Hatred flashed there, pure and sharp. "You think the birds love you?" she whispered. "They use you. Just as every crown will use you once they learn what your blood can retrieve." Nerissa felt the warning land because part of it was true. Power loved useful wounds. Courts turned survivors into tools and called it gratitude. If she lived through this, the same people who had sent her to be eaten might kneel tomorrow and ask her to fetch every buried crime that served them. Luceryn looked at her then, not as king to servant, as if he had heard the warning too. He turned to the court. "Nerissa Vale is not crown property." The words struck the gallery quiet. Marith laughed, though the sound broke halfway. "How noble! The king protects the raven-cursed girl because she brought him a sister and a crown." "No," Luceryn said. "I protect the truth because my court tried to feed it to birds." The lost crown flared at Nerissa's feet. The open panel inside it bled again, and new words crawled across the skin-thin mirror glass. "Ask who signed the mourning decree." Luceryn's face hardened. Marith went still. Elianor closed her eyes, as if she had known this part would come. Luceryn looked at his sister. "What mourning decree?" Elianor's voice was fragile but clear. "The decree that declared me too broken to rule." Nerissa looked at Marith. "You signed it with her face." Marith did not answer. The ravens answered for her. They lifted 3 mirror shards into the air. The pieces turned red with reflected memory, showing a council chamber 13 years ago. Marith sat behind a veil, wearing Elianor's stolen face. Her hand moved across a parchment, while nobles wept with practiced restraint. Princess Elianor Vere, broken by grief, withdraws from claim and voice. The signature at the bottom was Elianor's. but the hand holding the pen wore Marith's black pearl ring. The vision vanished. Court whispers became shouts. Luceryn drew one slow breath. You made my sister sign away her own voice. Marith's beauty cracked. I preserved the realm from a disputed crown. You murdered my father. I removed a king who would have started a succession war. You buried my sister alive. I kept her alive. The answer was so cold that even the ravens stopped moving. Marith lifted her chin. Yes, I kept her alive, because dead blood loses power. Living blood can be borrowed. Her face steadied the court. Her silence protected your reign. My lie gave you 13 years of rule, Luceryn. Do not pretend you gained nothing from it. The blow landed. Nerissa saw it hit him. Luceryn did not look away from Marith, but something in his face tightened around shame. A king could be innocent of the original theft and still crowned by its benefit. That was the blade Marith had saved for him. The court waited. If he defended himself, Marith would use it. If he denied the benefit, the ravens would know. Luceryn turned toward the lost crown. Then, slowly, he removed the black iron war circlet from his own head. The gallery gasped. I was crowned in the absence your lie created, he said. That does not make the lie mine to keep. He placed the war circlet in the ash beside the lost crown. The two crowns sat together, one true and bloodied, one lawful and false by silence. The ravens lowered their heads. Marith's face twisted. You would shame your own reign for her? Luceryn looked first at Elianor, then at Nerissa. No, he said, for what was buried. The largest raven stepped onto the lost crown and pecked the mirror glass once. A final vision opened in the ash. Marith, younger, kneeling before a black feather altar. She cut her own palm and pressed the blood into a mirror shard. A voice from the ravens asked, What will you give for a face? Marith whispered, My own. The court watched as the mirror swallowed Marith's true face years before she stole Elianor's. Nerissa understood then. Marith had not only stolen beauty or power, she had erased herself first, believing a woman without a face could wear any destiny. The vision closed. For the first time, Marith looked afraid. The ravens turned toward Nerissa. The mark beneath her collarbone burned with one clean command. Not kill. Name. Nerissa faced Marith. What is your true face? Marith stepped back. The mirror shards around her rose from the ash. Her borrowed skin began to crack. Not like glass, like old paint peeling from a portrait that had been worshipped too long. A thin line split beneath Marith's left eye, then another across her throat, then a third at the corner of her mouth. Beneath the flawless face the court had trusted for 13 years, something pale and unfinished shifted in the dark. The mirror shards rose around her in a slow circle, each one reflecting a different version of the woman she had been. A young court orphan in a gray dress, standing behind royal children no one saw. A girl watching Princess Elianor crowned by every eye in the room. A woman kneeling before a black feather altar, cutting her palm and offering her own face to the ash raven's older hunger. Then, nothing. A blank oval where a face should have been. Marith pressed both hands to her cheeks. Stop it. The ravens did not stop. Nerissa stood at the edge of the feeding yard, the black feather mark beneath her collarbone burning with a steady heat. She felt no triumph. That surprised her. She had imagined that seeing Marith stripped before the court would taste like justice. It tasted like ash, because Marith had once been no one too. But unlike Nerissa, she had chosen to fill her emptiness with another woman's life. Luceryn stood beside the two crowns in the ash, the true dragon crown, blood, stained and bent, and the black iron war circlet he had removed from his own head. His face was hard, but his eyes had changed. They no longer looked only at Marith as the enemy. They looked at the whole court that had made her lie useful. The largest raven clicked its beak. Nerissa understood. Name yourself, she said. Marith laughed, but the sound broke. You think names matter? You stole a face because yours mattered too little. The words struck deeper than Nerissa intended. Marith's expression twisted, and for one breath, the cracking skin revealed raw fury underneath. I was born to hold veils for women like Elianor, to stand beside crowns, never beneath them. She would have ruled because blood chose her. Luceryn would have ruled because pity protected him. I had sharper hands than both of them, and no throne would ever look my way. Elianor, still leaning on Luceryn's arm, lifted her head. Her true face was pale and hollow after years beneath ash, but her eyes were clear. So you took mine. Marith looked at her. For the first time, the hatred faltered. You had everything, Marith whispered. I had a crown that made me a target. You had a name. And you buried it? The mirror shards tightened around Marith. The second face beneath her skin pressed outward one last time, then tore free in a flash of silver and black. The court screamed as a stolen reflection peeled away from Marith's body and hung in the air. Elianor's public face, younger and composed, the version the court had mourned, obeyed, and hidden behind for 13 years. The ravens descended. They did not touch Marith's flesh. They devoured the false face. Beak by beak, shard by shard, the borrowed Elianor disappeared into ash-dark wings until nothing remained but Marith herself. Her true face was not monstrous. That made the court quieter. She was older than she had looked, thinner, with tear tracks burned pale into her cheeks and one eye clouded by mirror damage. Her features were ordinary in the most devastating way. No divine beauty, no royal reflection, no borrowed grief. Only a woman who had destroyed lives because she believed being unseen was worse than becoming cruel. Nerissa's throat tightened. Marith saw the pity and hated it. Do not look at me like that. Nerissa's voice stayed soft. Then stop hiding behind stolen pain. Marith Lunge, not toward Elianor, toward the true crown. Luceryn moved, but the ravens were faster. They swept down in a black storm, blocking Marith from the bloodied gold. She screamed and reached through wings, fingers grazing the crown's bent edge. The crown answered. Blood flared across the old gold, and a final memory opened above the ash yard. King Tharion falling, Marith wearing Elianor's face, Elianor being dragged below. And one more piece the court had not seen. Luceryn, younger, unconscious on the balcony floor, blood at his temple. Marith standing over him with the crown in her hands, hesitating. Lady Marith had not spared him. Elianor had. In the memory, the real Elianor, half-faced and bleeding, seized Marith's wrist and whispered, "If you kill him, the ravens will know your blood." Marith dropped the crown. The ash ravens took it. The vision vanished. Luceryn turned slowly toward his sister. Elianor did not look away. "I lied to save you," she said again. "Then I paid for the lie." The court was silent. No one dared breathe over that truth. Nerissa stepped toward the crowns. The ravens parted for her. She looked at the true dragon crown, then at Luceryn. "The ravens brought it back," she said, "but they have not chosen who wears it." Luceryn's gaze held hers. What do they choose? Nerissa looked at the flock. The answer came through the mark beneath her collarbone, not as command, but as vow. They choose what must be witnessed before anyone wears it. The lost crown opened fully. From inside its bloodied rim, black ash rose into the shape of a decree. Princess Elianor Vare, first chosen by the true crown. Luceryn Vare, crowned by emergency war right after hidden violence. Lady Marith, face thief and keeper of false mourning. Nerissa Vale, Raven Vow witness. The court stared at her name. Not cursed girl. Witness. Marith laughed weakly from behind the raven storm. Witness? She is a servant with a bird mark. The ravens turned toward her. Nerissa did not. She looked at Luceryn instead. If I speak what the crown shows, some will say I am forcing succession. They will. If I stay silent, Marith's lie survives. It will. And if I speak, you may lose the throne. Luceryn looked at the war circlet lying in the ash, then at Elianor, then back at Nerissa. I would rather lose a throne than keep sitting on my sister's grave. The words moved through the ash yard like fire through dry feathers. The ravens bowed. Nerissa lifted the blood-stained crown with both hands. It was heavier than she expected. The moment her fingers touched it, every raven took flight, and the ash sky above the court turned black. Then the true crown spoke through all their wings. Let the first chosen answer. Let the first chosen answer. The true crown's voice rolled through the ash yard in 100 raven throats. Every noble turned toward Elianor. For 13 years, the dragon court had spoken around her absence. They had pitied the veiled princess, obeyed the grieving guardian, accepted Luceryn's war circlet. and let silence build a throne over a woman buried breathing beneath ash. Now Elianor stood before them with her true face restored, thin and shaking, one hand gripping her brother's arm so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The crown had chosen her first. But choice was not the same as freedom. Nerissa held the blood-stained crown in both hands and felt its weight pull through her arms. The ravens circled above, waiting. The court waited too, but not with reverence, with hunger. Some wanted Elianor to reclaim the throne, so Luceryn's reign could be called false. Some wanted her to refuse, so the old order could pretend nothing needed to change. Some wanted Nerissa blamed before anyone had to admit a servant girl had become the only clean witness in the yard. Luceryn looked at his sister. He did not speak. That mattered. Elianor's breath trembled. If I answer, they will use it. Nerissa said softly, they have used your silence longer. Elianor closed her eyes. Merith laughed from where the ravens held her back. Her true face looked smaller without stolen beauty, but her voice still knew where to cut. Go on, princess. Tell them you want the crown. Let them see you as a woman who lied, vanished, and returned only when a cursed girl dragged you out. Or refuse it and prove I was right to rule your grief for you. Luceryn's dragonfire flared. Elianor's grip tightened on his arm. No. He stopped. The court saw that too. The sister who had been buried was still protecting the brother crowned in her absence. Elianor released him and stepped toward Nerissa. The ravens lowered with her, their wings forming a dark half-circle behind the crown. Nerissa expected the princess to reach for the gold. She did not. Elianor touched the blood on the rim with 2 fingers, then pressed them to her own throat. I was first chosen, she said. The crown burned. The court inhaled sharply. I lied about the crown answering both of us because I thought it would save my brother from the council. The ravens screamed once, but they did not descend. Elianor did not flinch. That lie helped Merith bury me. It helped Luceryn's war-crowning stand. It helped the court pretend my silence was grief instead of imprisonment. Luceryn's face tightened. Elianor turned toward him. But Luceryn did not steal my crown. À murmurose. Merith snarled. You cannot cleanse him with sentiment. Elianor looked back at the court. I am not cleansing anyone. I am naming cleanly what was done. Merith stole my face. The council accepted my absence. Luceryn inherited a lie before he was old enough to know its shape. The true crown flared brighter in Nerissa's hands. The decree of ash above them changed. Not false king, not true queen, witness pending. Nerissa felt the crown's demand shift. It did not want a simple replacement. That was what courts wanted. One body removed, another placed. History made tidy enough to survive ceremony. The ravens wanted blood truth before power. Elianor faced the crown again. I will not wear it today. Gasps tore through the gallery. Luceryn looked at her sharply. Elianor lifted her chin. Not because it belongs to my brother. Not because I am too broken. Not because Merith made me unclean. I refuse because a crown returned from ash should not be placed on any head before every buried face is named. The ash ravens bowed. Nerissa's mark burned, not painfully now, but with fierce recognition. The true crown spoke again. Then who answers until the ash is red? The court erupted. A kingdom needed a ruler. Even frightened nobles knew that. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Council lords looked at one another with calculation already waking in their eyes. Merith smiled through blood, sensing the crack. Luceryn stepped forward. I will. The crown's blood darkened. The ravens turned toward him. He stopped before Nerissa and Elianor, crownless war circlet lying discarded in the ash behind him. Not as the chosen heir, not as the clean king, as the one who benefited from the burial and will answer for it until the court can no longer hide behind my ignorance. The ravens did not bow. They watched. Nerissa looked at him. And if the ash names crimes that make your reign impossible? His eyes held hers. Then I step down before I ask anyone to lie for me. The words fell into the yard like a blade laid flat. No threat, no plea, a vow. The crown's fire softened. Merith's smile vanished. Elianor looked at her brother, and for the first time, grief did not own her face completely. Something like relief passed through it, painful and fragile. Nerissa lifted the crown slightly. The raven vow records this answer. The ravens cried out. Ash rose from the ground and formed 3 circles around the crowns, one around Elianor, one around Luceryn, one around Nerissa. The first circle glowed gold. First chosen. The second glowed red, crowned by emergency lie, answer-bound until witness completes. The third glowed black silver. Raven vow witness, not property of crown. The last words silenced the court harder than the others. Luceryn read them, then looked at Nerissa. Not property of crown, he repeated. Marith laughed bitterly. Say that now. Wait until every lord wants her ravens to fetch their enemies' secrets. Luceryn did not look away from Nerissa. Then every lord will learn the difference between witness and weapon. Nerissa wanted to distrust the words. Part of her did, but the ravens did not scream. That mattered too. The true crown lowered from her hands by itself and settled onto the ash between Luceryn and Elianor, unworn. The blood on its rim stopped dripping. The hidden panel remained open, mirror glass visible inside, the words still dark and clear. Elianor wore another face. But beneath them, new words appeared. Elianor has answered in her own. Marith made a sound like a wounded animal. The mirror shards around her rose again. Her true face shook, stripped of power but not of hatred. If she will not wear it, Marith whispered, then the crown remains hungry. Nerissa turned, Marith's eyes fixed on the blood-stained gold, then on Luceryn, then on Nerissa. Before anyone could move, she drove both hands into the ash at her feet and screamed a name none of them knew. The feeding yard split. Not beneath Nerissa this time, beneath the true crown. A black mirror opened in the ash, and from inside it rose the face Marith had given away, years ago, young, beautiful, empty-eyed, and starving. The ravens shrieked. Marith smiled through her ruined mouth. You wanted my true face? She said. Then let it eat yours. You wanted my true face? Marith said. Then let it eat yours. The black mirror opened beneath the true crown, like a mouth in the ash. From it rose a face without a body. Young, beautiful, empty-eyed, starving. It was Marith as she must have been before the black feather altar took her offering years ago, before ambition hollowed her into a woman who could wear grief, royalty, and tenderness like borrowed silk. The face floated above the ash with mirror-smooth skin and lips parted in silent hunger. Then its eyes turned toward Elianor. Elianor went rigid. Luceryn stepped in front of his sister. The ravens screamed, but the scream broke halfway, as if the black mirror were swallowing sound itself. The true crown shook on the ground between the 3 ash circles. Its open panel flashed red, the old words Elianor wore, another face burning so bright they looked freshly cut. Nerissa felt the raven vow mark beneath her collarbone turn cold. Not hot, cold. That frightened her more. The ravens were not bowing now. They were circling without landing, their ember eyes fixed on the floating face. Whatever Marith had summoned was older than the theft they had exposed. It was the price she had paid, returned hungry after 13 years of being denied a body. Marith laughed through cracked lips. Do you understand now? I gave my face first. I paid before I took hers. I was owed a life large enough to wear. The floating face drifted toward Elianor. Luceryn lifted his arm, dragonfire flaring across his hand. Nerissa seized his sleeve. No fire. His eyes burned down at her. It is reaching for my sister. It wants a face. Fire gives it yours in shadow. The face turned at the word yours. Its empty eyes fixed on Luceryn. His dragonfire dimmed at once, pulled thin like gold thread through black glass. Elianor grabbed his arm. Luceryn, stop. He forced the fire down, breathing hard. Nerissa stepped forward. The floating face turned to her. For one heartbeat, Nerissa saw herself reflected in it, not as she was, ash-stained and trembling, but as the court had named her, raven, cursed, dirty, useful, disposable. Then the reflection changed. It showed her with Marith's beauty, with Elianor's crown, with Luceryn's gaze locked on her, not in suspicion, but devotion. A cruel, impossible promise. Wear a better face, the mirror seemed to whisper. Let them love what they can bear to see. Nerissa's stomach twisted. She had spent years pretending she did not want to be looked at kindly. That had been a lie. Of course she wanted it. A girl treated like an omen, still dreamed of walking into a room without watching people flinch. The face drifted closer. Luceryn's voice cut through the silence. Nerissa, not command, warning, fear. That brought her back. Marith saw it and snarled. Do not pretend you are above hunger. They spat behind your back. They tied your wrists. They sent you to be eaten. Take a face that makes them kneel. Nerissa looked at her. For the first time, she understood Marith completely, and that was why she could not become her. No, Nerissa said. The ravens went silent. The floating face paused. Nerissa lifted one ash-covered hand to the black feather mark beneath her collarbone. The raven vow does not retrieve truth so I can wear it as revenge. Marith's eyes widened. You think mercy will save you? No. Nerissa stepped into the black-silver circle the crown had drawn around her. Witness will. The true crown opened wider. The hidden panel inside it split again, revealing not mirror glass this time, but a hollow lined with black feathers. The largest raven dropped from the sky and landed beside it. In its beak was a single shard of the mirror veil that had covered Elianor's face. It placed the shard at Nerissa's feet. Choice. Always choice. Nerissa picked it up. Luceryn took one step toward her, then stopped himself. Good. He was learning. Nerissa held the shard toward Marith's floating face. What is your name? Marith's ruined body flinched. The floating face smiled. I had many. No, Nerissa said. Before the altar, before Elianor, before the veil, before you decided being unseen was worse than being cruel. The ash yard tightened around the question. The ravens lowered. Even the crown waited. Marith's mouth opened. No sound came. The floating face flickered. For the first time, the beautiful reflection looked afraid. Nerissa understood. Marith had given away more than a face. She had given away the name that belonged to it. Without that name, the returned face could only hunger. It could never become whole. Elianor spoke her lie cleanly, Nerissa said. Now speak yours. Marith shook her head. No. The mirror face lunged. Nerissa lifted the shard. The face struck its own reflection and screamed. Not in pain. In recognition, images burst across the ash yard. A little girl called Myra, not Myareth, standing outside a royal nursery with a tray in her hands, nobles passing her without seeing her, Princess Elianor giving her a ribbon once, smiling kindly, and forgetting by dinner. Mara, watching the crown, answer Elianor, and realizing the world would kneel to blood before it ever looked at hunger. The vision shifted to the black feather altar, Mara cutting her palm, Mara whispering, Take the face, no one remembers. Give me one they cannot ignore. The ravens answered. The mirror swallowed her name. The vision shattered. The floating face screamed again, weaker now. Nerissa looked at Marith. Mara. Marith collapsed to her knees. The court heard the name. The ravens heard it. The true crown heard it. The floating face stopped reaching for Elianor and turned back toward the woman who had abandoned it. Mara looked up in horror. No, the face descended. It did not devour her. It returned. Mara screamed as her own face settled over her skin, not restoring beauty, not granting youth, but making her whole enough to be judged. Every borrowed reflection peeled away. Every trace of Elianor vanished from her throat, her eyes, her voice. When she lifted her head, she was only herself. Older, ordinary, terrified. The ravens landed around her in a perfect black circle. The lost crown spoke through their beaks. Face returned, lie remains. Luceryn stepped forward. His voice was cold, but no longer wild. Lady Mara, keeper of false mourning, thief of my sister's face, murderer of King Tharion, what do you answer? Mara laughed softly, broken beyond elegance. That I did what bloodlines taught me. I took what I was not given. Elianor stood beside Luceryn, still weak, still shaking, but upright. And I answer that what was taken will be named. Nerissa lowered the mirror shard. Her mark cooled. The ravens bowed to her not as a queen, not as a weapon, but as witness. The true crown rose from the ash and hovered between Luceryn and Elianor. For one breath, everyone thought it would choose. Instead, it turned toward Nerissa. On the open panel, new words wrote themselves in dark red. No crown before the ash is red. The court fell silent. Luceryn looked at Nerissa. This time, He did not ask what the crown wanted. He asked, "What does the witness require?" Nerissa held his gaze, feeling the full danger of being useful to a king. Then she answered carefully, "That no one wears what was returned until everyone buried by it has been named." The ravens cried once. Agreement. The ash yard gates opened by themselves. Beyond them, dawn was beginning to pale the sky. And from every furnace, aviary, and sealed ash vault in the palace, the forgotten ravens began bringing bones home. The forgotten ravens began bringing bones home. They came from the palace furnaces first. Black wings burst from chimneys no servant had dared clean in years, each raven carrying a small white bone, a strip of burned cloth, a gold tooth, a ring melted halfway into ash. Then they came from sealed aviaries, from roof gutters, from the old execution drains beneath the East Tower. They came from places the court had stopped naming because naming made guilt too heavy to carry. By the time dawn touched the ash yard, the sky above the dragon court had turned black with witnesses. No one moved, not even Myra. She knelt inside the ring of ravens with her true face returned, ordinary and ruined, eyes fixed on the bones falling one by one into the ash. Without borrowed beauty, she looked less like a monster and more like the warning beneath every court, what hunger became when it was taught that only faces with power deserved to be seen. Nerissa stood beside the unworn true crown, her black feather mark cool beneath her collarbone. She had expected triumph to feel louder. Instead, each bone that struck the ash made her chest tighten. These had been people, not proof, not tools, not steps toward a cleaner throne. People. The largest raven landed before her and dropped a child's bracelet made of dragon bone at her feet. Elianor made a sound. Luceryn caught her before she swayed. This time, no one mistook his movement for weakness. The Dragon King held his sister upright before the court that had hidden her, and the gesture cut deeper than any command. The true crown opened its panel again. Blood-red letters formed along the mirror glass. "Read the ash." Nerissa looked at the ravens. "I do not know their names." The largest raven clicked its beak once. The crown answered. "Then ask who buried them." All eyes turned toward Myra. Her mouth trembled. For one breath, Nerissa thought she would refuse. Then the ravens around her opened their beaks, and the ash beneath her knees began to heat. Myra bowed her head. "The bracelet belonged to Prince Calian," she whispered. "King Tharion's youngest nephew. Declared fever, dead, burned because his mother said Elianor should inherit before Luceryn." A raven lifted the bracelet and placed it beside the true crown. Another bone fell. Myra flinched. "Lady Sereth, midwife. She saw the mirror shard on Elianor's face before I learned how to wear it." Another. "Archivist Halen." He copied the first mourning decree twice and hid the second draft. Another. "3 girls from the lower aviary." They heard Elianor sobbing below the ash. The court became very quiet. Nerissa heard weeping behind the gallery columns. Servants. Not nobles. Servants always knew where bodies vanished. They simply lacked the rank to make disappearance a crime. Luceryn turned toward the gathered court. "No one leaves until every bone is named." A council lord stepped forward, pale with outrage. "Your Majesty, this is not order. This is public collapse." Luceryn's amber eyes burned. "Then let the old order collapse in daylight." The ravens screamed approval. Nerissa looked at him then, and for the first time she saw not a king protected by fire, but a man standing in the ruin of a throne that had benefited him and choosing not to look away. That mattered. It did not erase what his court had done, but it mattered. Elianor slowly released his arm and stood on her own. Her face was still pale, still scarred at the edges where the mirror veil had bitten too long. But when she spoke, the ravens fell silent. "I will name what I remember," she said. Luceryn looked at her. "You do not have to." "Yes," she said. He stopped. Elianor's eyes softened with pain. "You are learning. Keep learning." A faint, broken smile crossed Nerissa's mouth before she could stop it. The princess stepped toward the crown. "I remember the midwife. I remember Halen. I remember a guard who slipped me water through the ash door. His name was Tor. Mareth had him burned when I asked for him twice." Mara closed her eyes. The ravens carried each named bone into a growing circle around the 2 crowns. The war circlet remained in the ash beside the true crown, black iron beside bloodied gold. Neither looked holy now. They looked like objects waiting for the living to decide whether power could exist without swallowing witness. When the last raven returned from the palace furnaces, the ash yard floor was covered in names, not written in ink, written in bone, ring, feather, tooth, and memory. The true crown spoke once more. The ash has been read. The court inhaled. Luceryn did not reach for the crown. Elianor did not either. Nerissa looked between them. The largest raven turned its ember eyes toward her. Choice. Her stomach tightened. No. Luceryn's gaze sharpened. No, I will not decide which royal head receives what the ravens returned. Mara laughed weakly. Then all this, and still you are afraid. Nerissa turned to her. Yes. The honesty silenced the yard. I am afraid, Nerissa said. Afraid that if I touch one crown too long, someone will call my hand destiny. Afraid that if I speak one name too clearly, a king will ask me to speak all names for him. Afraid that the court will stop calling me cursed only because witness is more useful. Luceryn's face changed. Nerissa looked at him fully. So hear this before the ravens and the ash. I will not belong to your crown. The words carried. The ravens bowed. Luceryn lowered his head once. Then the crown will learn to ask. The court stirred. He turned toward the nobles. Until every named dead is recorded, every hidden aviary opened, and every mourning decree examined, no crown will be worn. Elianor looked at him in surprise. Luceryn continued. Elianor was first chosen. I was crowned by emergency lie. The court will not correct a theft with another ceremony before the truth has finished breathing. The true crown's blood stopped glowing. The war circlet cracked once down the middle. Mara stared at Luceryn as if he had finally done the one thing she could not understand. He had set down power while others were watching. The record of ash accepted it. The ravens lifted the true crown and placed it on the highest dragon rib perch, unworn, visible to all. Then they placed the broken war circlet below it. Not discarded. Recorded. Dawn brightened. The ash sky thinned from black to gray. Luceryn ordered Myra bound, not in iron, but in mirror chain made from the shards she had used. Every morning, she would name one person buried beneath the ash. Every night, she would face her returned true reflection until no borrowed grief remained to hide behind. When guards dragged her away, she looked once at Nerissa. You will learn, Mara whispered. Being seen is another kind of cage. Nerissa did not answer quickly. Then she said, Then I will keep the door open. Mara's expression faltered. Only then did the guards take her. Later, when the court had emptied into frightened work, and the ravens slept along the rib perches, Nerissa stood alone near the feeding pit. The funeral meat remained untouched, blackened in its silver bowl. She picked it up and poured it into the ash. Not for the ravens, for the nameless dead who had never been fed anything but silence. Luceryn approached slowly and stopped several steps away. You can leave the palace, he said. Nerissa looked at him. Can I? Yes. No guards? Not unless you ask. No royal order calling me witness? No. The answer unsettled her more than command would have. She turned toward him. And if I stay until the ash records are opened? His voice lowered. Then I will be grateful. And after that? Then you choose again. The ravens stirred above them. Nerissa looked up at the true crown on the rib perch, then at Elianor resting beneath a healer's cloak across the yard, alive under open sky. I will stay until the buried are named, she said. Luceryn's eyes held hers. Thank you. And I will decide what the ravens hear. Yes. And if your court tries to use me? His dragonfire glowed softly beneath his skin. Then they answer to me. Nerissa's gaze sharpened. He paused, then corrected himself. And to you. The largest raven clicked its beak in approval. Nerissa almost smiled. Almost. Above them, the true crown's hidden panel closed at last. But the words remained, burned into everyone who had seen them. Elianor wore another face. And now, beneath that truth, the ash had written a second one. Nerissa Vale returned what the crown could not.